Brooklyn Nets are moving up in the world and moving up in our power rankings. Even without Kevin Durant on the court, the Nets win all 5 games during their West Coast swing, and last night beating the Clippers 112-108. But is it good enough for number 1 in our power rankings? Well, not quite. That spot still belongs to the Jazz, according to our Colin Ward-Henninger. But the Nets, they do jump up 5 spots to number 2. Let's welcome in the man behind the power rankings, Colin Ward-Henninger. All right, so the Nets are now hitting their stride. There's no Kevin Durant. And over the past couple weeks, Colin, when we've talked to you, it's really been how the Nets need to gel. They need to be cohesive. So they're starting to do that. Are they now exceeding your expectations, maybe even a little bit sooner than you thought?
Yeah, I think so. And it's really because, Kevin Durant has been out and he's been their best player. I think everyone respects him as their best player. So in order to see the Nets playing this well without him, I think is really a surprise and kind of sending a message to the rest of the league. Steve Nash talked about this team's toughness, and that's not really something we associated with this trio of Kyrie Irving, James Harden, and Kevin Durant. But Steve Nash said, look, we've had guys in and out of the lineup. No matter who we've thrown out there, this team has gone out and competed, and James Harden has been absolutely phenomenal. He's averaging almost 12 assists since he came over to the Nets and has really taken a back seat in terms of scoring. But now you see when Kevin Durant goes out, this is still James Harden, the guy we saw with the Rockets. He's capable of going out, getting 35, 40 every night, and that's with facilitating and setting up teammates. So I think, the Nets couldn't have asked for a better road trip. They've never swept a West Coast road trip in the history of their franchise, and now they have. Draymond Green said it after they played the Nets. He said, this is the team to beat in the East. And, coming from a guy like that who went to 5 straight finals, I think that holds some sway. So, the Nets really have to be happy with where they are right now. And, once Kevin Durant returns, I think this team is really going to start to scare some people around the NBA.
All right, so that's what I wanted to follow up with you with, because Kyrie after the game said, we have a lot in common right now, our mentality, we're having fun. So you do think that when KD comes back, they're just going to continue to gel? There's not going to be any sort of issue here between these 3?
I think there will be, things are going to come up. It happens. You've seen teams like the Jazz with Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert. They've had their thing. Obviously, Kevin Durant has a history of clashing with teammates for brief periods of time with the Warriors, but that's natural for a team that has championship aspirations. I think on court, I'm not sure there's going to be an issue. These guys wanted to play together, and I think that they have skill sets that complement each other. The issue with them is going to be defense, and if they go out and are giving up 120, 130 points a night, they're not going to be able to win all those games, even if their offense is as great as it is. So I think if their defense doesn't start to come together once those guys are all there, that could lead to some tension. But I think otherwise, these guys are kind of on a singular mission, and they wanted to be together. So I think it'll last pretty well.
All right, they're all happy now. That is good for them. Let's go to your biggest riser this week. That would be the Raptors, up 8 spots to number 7. So they started off 2-8, then they went 14-7. People were counting these guys out early. So how do they remain contenders, though?
Yeah, when they were in their kind of rough start to the season, I asked Coach Nick Nurse, I said, look, this is a team that's had success. It's a confident group. What's the balance between not hitting the panic button and also, making sure that you tweak stuff enough to not continue this spiral of losing? And he said that's a really difficult balance to strike, but it seems like they're doing it. And by what they're doing, Nick Nurse is really trying everything. He's playing a whole bunch of different rotations. He was playing Aaron Baines and Chris Boucher, who have pretty much been centers all year. He's playing them together against the Philadelphia 76ers, and that was successful. He started Norman Powell, which has really unlocked him, and he's been playing tremendously offensively after a great year last year. So, they've won pretty much all their games last week without Kyle Lowry, who's been out with an injury, and Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam. I mean, these guys have championship pedigree. They're stepping up. Guys like DeAndre Bembry have entered the starting lineup, and really what stands out about the Raptors is their defense. And going back to the Kawhi Leonard years and last year, that defense has really been their trademark. And if you've watched them over the past week, 2 weeks, they're just flying around defensively. It is impossible for teams to get open looks against them. They've been a top 3 defense for the last 6 games. I think they've really started to turn the corner here, and I expect big things from the Raptors for the rest of the season.
Colin, from your biggest riser to your biggest faller, the Nuggets dropping 7 spots this week, all the way down to number 13. So they're struggling. Jokic's MVP case took a hit this week. Do you think, we don't know the schedule for the second half of the season yet, but can they get it together in the second half of the season?
Yeah, it's hard to predict, right? Whether we don't know what games are coming up. But look, Jamal Murray said it after the game. He said, "We are not panicking. We know what this team is capable of." Obviously, they were down 3-1 twice in the playoffs last year, so they're not going to start getting down on themselves or doubting themselves based on a couple of losses. But if you look, their defense for the last 10 games has been a bottom 10 defense, and that's been a problem that has been with them for the past few seasons. Jeremy Grant leaving, going to Detroit where he's flourishing, it really hurt them. They don't have that long, rangy defender to guard those wings. And obviously, the Nuggets have had a lot of injury problems recently. Paul Millsap's been out, JaMychal Green's been out, Gary Harris has been out, Will Barton's been out. So when you don't have your full complement of players, you look at Jamal Murray, he's really starting to take off this season, play like the player we saw in the bubble. And Nikola Jokic, as you mentioned, whether the Nuggets are winning enough for him to be MVP, he's certainly putting up MVP numbers. So I think as long as those two are healthy and connected, I think the Nuggets always have a chance to do well. But it has to be a little bit concerning when you hear guys like Jamal Murray say, "Look, don't worry, we'll be fine in the playoffs." That's a tough mentality to have, especially during a compacted season and you're not quite sure how things are going to shake out.
The NBA trade deadline just around the corner. It is March 25th, so just about a month away. The Kings are being dethroned left and right. Can't get a win. They've lost 7 in a row. So do you think they should be sellers at the trade deadline? And if so, any guys you think they should be looking at?
Yeah, the throne isn't even in the same room. They're in a different parlor or something like that. The Kings have just been awful recently, and it was kind of similar to the way they started the season. They can't get any stops defensively. They've had a few injury problems too, but really this is a bigger problem. And I think that, if we were talking about Vlade Divac and the old regime, I would say that they might go the opposite way and try to be buyers at the deadline because they just have this mission to make the playoffs. I think with new GM Monty McNair in there, he comes from the Houston Rockets system, analytics forward. He's not going to hang on to players who aren't going to help them long term. And I think he understands that possibly bottoming out this season with a very good 2021 draft class wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. So if they do want to be sellers, which I expect them to be, I think Harrison Barnes is a name that's been thrown out there quite a bit. The Celtics have been linked to him. Other teams could use a veteran forward who's versatile defensively, can play multiple positions, hit big shots, championship pedigree. And then another guy is Nemanja Bjelica, who's a power forward who really fell out of the rotation until the Kings had some recent injuries, but a sharp shooter, 3-point shooter, offensive guy. And teams are always looking for a 6'10" guy who can hit threes consistently. So those are a couple of guys I expect to see on the move if the Kings do decide to be sellers.
We'll see if they can even try to get back in the castle at this point. Colin Ward-Henninger, thanks so much for hopping on with us here, taking a look at some of the NBA games tonight. By the way, do you want to mention you can check out Colin's full power rankings list on our website, including all of these teams right there where their movement is at cbssports.com.
Want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis. No yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.